Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO here at Scrum.org. And today, I'm actually very, very excited for this particular podcast. I'm here with Melissa Reeve and James Ewel, or Jim Ewel, from the Agile Marketing Alliance. So obviously, a lot of people today are using Scrum and Agile in the marketing context. So it's really exciting to have these two experts on the platform today or on the podcast today. Welcome to the podcast, Melissa and Jim.
We're excited to be here.
Great. And I believe you're both speaking to me from Boulder, Colorado. Is that right, both of you, or am I completely wrong there?
Melissa's in Boulder. I'm in Seattle, Washington.
Oh, that's it. I knew it was somewhere out west, which is great. So I know our listeners always like to know where people are talking to them from. And again, I'm obviously in Boston, Massachusetts. So to get going, and Jim, if you don't mind, we'll start with you. What is the Agile Marketing Alliance? It sounds a little bit Star Wars-y for me, so I'm obviously excited. Tell me a little bit more about it.
Well, Dave, the Agile Marketing Alliance arose out of what we called Sprint 2, okay, which is a meeting where we revised the Agile Marketing Manifesto. And one of the things that the community asked for was some kind of organization to kind of look after Agile marketing, to make sure that it kept going, that we expanded the depth and breadth of adoption, that would be independent, and all of those things, right? And so really what we're trying to do is to bring together the global community of marketers, okay, who are passionate about Agile marketing and help them learn, share, and grow together. So we got started last year, about almost a year ago. We're coming up on a year, and we're super excited. We're growing and starting to contribute to that goal of making Agile marketing, a real thing across a lot of big organizations,
That sounds awesome. And just to, the Agile Marketing Manifesto, for our listeners who may not know about that was really motivated by marketeers looking at the Agile Manifesto and other things in the space and not finding it particularly direct to their needs. Is that right? A little bit more. Maybe Melissa, you want to add a little bit to that?
Sure, and it's a fair statement. I think the heart of the Agile Software Manifesto still lives on in the Agile Marketing Manifesto, but there were a few words there that got a little bit tricky for Agile marketers, and documentation and software just weren't necessarily resonating. So when you look at the Agile Marketing Manifesto, you'll see things like focusing on customer value in business outcomes over activity and outputs. So sometimes marketers get stuck in this trap of checking the box. Oh, we did the weekly newsletter. And it's good for them to take a breath once in a while and say, that weekly newsletter, is it truly delivering customer value? Things like delivering value early and often over waiting for perfection. Another one where it's always easy to change yet another pixel. The logo, let's nudge it over a couple more pixels to the left. So we really wanted to speak to the marketers. And we did that through the Agile Marketing Manifesto.
Interesting. And the time's sort of right, because never before have we seen marketing provided with more data, more ability to experiment, more ability to connect with customers that the digital age is really providing us with, right? And I suppose that it extends the value of Agile marketing even more because of the use of digital technology.
Absolutely, Dave. Let me just speak to that for just a minute. One of the core things about Agile marketing is this iterative approach of delivering minimum viable product type of things and experimenting and getting stuff out, fast. Okay. And digital has really contributed to us being able to do that and to measure it.
Yeah. Which is actually, that's a theme we hear on the podcast, when we're talking to car manufacturers or talking to pharmaceutical companies. This digital change has really been the catalyst to an adoption of the agile mindset, and marketing hasn't been left behind, which is great. So let's lean in for a minute on really the frameworks, particularly Scrum. This is this is our community, the Scrum.org community podcast, so you can guess we're a little bit biased towards Scrum. So with respect to the frameworks, as you rightly said, Scrum came out of software, delivered, was before the Agile Manifesto, but it was very much now over the years has become more generic. The last Scrum guide actually replaced all of the terms that were software related in there. But tell me a little bit, if you don't mind, the role of frameworks in software versus marketing. Is there a difference? Is there a tension? Melissa, you brought some of that up when we talked about the manifesto. I think our listeners would be interested in that.
Yeah, I think how I would characterize it is there's some fundamental cultural differences. Without stereotyping, I'm going to stereotype. And what I mean by that is we understand that not everybody fits the mold, but in general, what we see is that software developers and folks over in IT are more accustomed to working with frameworks. And so it's natural for them to adopt a framework like Scrum. When we use the word framework in marketing, sometimes we get some puzzled looks. What do you mean by a framework? Is that a process? I think we're a little bit more accustomed to process. And then when you introduce a framework, what I've observed is that on the software side, there's a little bit of a relief. Oh, good. We have a model to follow. We have a process that we can embrace. Yay, there's a right way to do things. And on the marketing side, we see a little bit more, bristling might be a little bit extreme, but just a little bit more resistance of, is this going to stifle my creativity? How do I fit things that I don't feel like fit in a box, fit it into this box? And so when we're presenting a framework, oftentimes we're allowing a little bit more surface area for marketers to make it their own, to take that work and say, how do we fit this work into something like a Scrum framework?
Jim?
I'd like to add on to what Melissa said, in that marketers don't tend to practice canonical Scrum, right? They like to mix and match practices from Scrum, practices from Kanban, practices that, quite frankly, they make up and that seem to fit their way of working. And so if you ask marketers, what is the number one framework or methodology that they use, they'll describe it as Scrumban, okay? And what they mean by that is not formal Scrumban, okay? What they really mean is that they tend to mix and match everything until they find something that works for them as a team.
And the reason why do you think, Jim, that there is so much of a mix and match going on is because the nature of the work is so diverse and so different?
Yeah, if you think about developers, you develop features, you test features, you have different specialties, but marketing has, for anything to get out, for a campaign to get out, you might have 5, 6, 7 different specialties to do that. You've got people who write copy. You've got creatives who generate the graphics. You've got a strategist. You've got, a videographer. You just have a bunch of different people, right? And some of those people are not going to work in the time-boxed parts of Scrum. They're not going to work in 2-week cycles, right? They get a request to generate a graphic, right? And they're going to do that. They get streams of work coming in, and they're going to turn around and put that out and deliver that graphic. And so Kanban feels like a more natural approach for those people. Then you get other people who are building websites and they're doing things in 2 weeks or even monthly sprints because it's a deliverable, much like software guys have deliverables. So it's just in the nature of the work that it varies a lot, and the different specialties tend to gravitate towards different frameworks or methodologies.
So hang on a minute. I just need to really understand something. So talk a little bit about teams then in marketing, if you don't mind, because what I heard then was, yes, you may have a team, maybe building a website or delivering a campaign, but there's overlaying that team are a bunch of specialists that come in and out that may have some unique skills, like graphic design, like videography, like whatever, data maybe. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure, and if I can jump in here too, because you're absolutely right, Dave, that within marketing, I once heard that there's 42 different disciplines. And so you're not going to be able to make a Scrum team of 42. So Dave, we're on video for our listeners, and Dave is shaking his head. He's like, no.
Like 42 is a fantastic number, just for the record, but the meaning of life and everything. But yes, it would be a really hard team. I mean, just even doing the daily would be a challenge. So, okay, right. So you got 42 different disciplines in marketing. Okay.
Yeah, so we've got that. So typically you'll have your core team, and depending on what that team's objective is, you'll have a core team, and then you'll have the specialties dropping into that team. And if we're talking about content, if we're talking about a campaign, your core team might be your copywriter, your designer, your person who's going to deploy it, whether that be to production on a website or through an email. And then your specialist might be exactly what Jim said. You might have a film team that sits on top of that. You might have a data team. And it could be that the team wants that data person on the team, but it's a scarce resource. It's scarce talent. And so we're not able to embed that person into the team. So we've always got to balance this size of the team's mission, with what other talent the team needs on more of an ad hoc basis that they don't need in a long-lived team.
The other thing that happens, Dave, is that you have teams that are almost work as a service. So, for example, deployment, right? A large customer that I worked with, they had a deployment team that deployed to their website twice a day, and they had deadlines. If you got it in by 5 o'clock, on this day, it was deployed by 3 a.m. in the morning or whatever the time was, right? And then they had another time when you got things done. And it was just a service that worked for every single team. You didn't have to have each cross-functional team develop that service separately. They just all depended on this one group, which delivered this work as a service in such an efficient way that it was great, and nobody felt a need to have it on their own team.
But obviously that can create dependencies, which is, from my experience of working with marketing professionals, dependencies are the things that undermine our ability to go to market. And that's true of software as well. So how do you make these? Is it just by making things more transparent and making those dependencies or those impediments or those stopped, blocked elements transparent, that you manage that? Is that something that you would recommend?
How I would deal with those dependencies is the heartbeat of Scrum, which is what I characterize as cadence and synchronization, right? When we strip away the labels of sprint planning or sprint review, essentially what you have is this heartbeat. And for many teams, it's every 2 weeks. And if you start to take that heartbeat and you extend it into teams of teams and make sure that that heartbeat is synchronized so that you can surface dependencies on a predictable basis, right? And maybe it's a scrum of scrums, maybe it's it's another way to surface those, but you've got to have that way where everything's coordinated in order to really understand, are we still on track? Can you deliver those against those dependencies? And if you look at that cadence and synchronization of those events, of those ceremonies, I think you find a way for marketing teams to stay aligned with those specialized and that scarce talent.
So, Jim.
Well, I think it also has to do with the SLA and the speed and predictability of that other team being able to deliver it. To go back to Melissa's body analogy, you have the heartbeat of the Scrum teams, and how it beats. But the body also has other facilities, like if I touch my hand to a hot stove, right, it comes off regardless of where my heart is in terms of its beating, right? And because it happens so fast, it works, right? So one of the things that I was talking about, this deployment team, because they deployed so quickly, so dependably, twice a day, there was very little dependency because, very few situations require more than deploying to a website more than twice a day. There are situations, but not many of them.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Obviously, there's different services and different sorts of dependencies. Yeah, that's obviously more of just a deployment connection. It's a regular, you just fit it in and it goes out.
Right.
You also have the creative, which are less predictable, dependency, which requires that level of transparency and that level of coordination. And it's bringing these things, I guess, in a transparent and clear way to allow teams to react to them and to manage their work and their value in that context, I guess, which is interesting. So I do want to, push on a couple of interesting questions around roles or accountabilities. Product ownership in marketing is a real challenge from what I observe. Now, I'm not sure if ever that's just everybody's got an opinion and nobody wants to, or committees are the only way to get any agreement when there's a lot of very creative people in a room, or I don't know. But tell me a little bit from your experience, and you've both got a lot of experience in this. How the heck do you make that sort of accountability work, or does it? Do we need to get rid of it? Is it irrelevant to agile marketing?
So I have an opinion on this one, and I'd be interested in hearing Jim's as well. So I actually heard you say two things there, Dave. One was around prioritization and one was around reviewing. So in terms of a product owner, and sometimes we call this person a marketing owner. I think that role is critical to prioritize work for the team and to achieve a definition of done. Now, when we're talking about the definition of done, there's a line, and how I draw that line is this thing that we're producing complete and mistake-free? Does it meet our quality standards? And then on the other side of that line is opinion. So marketers have to get very, very clear on the quality standards, meaning, does it meet our brand guidelines? Does it meet our editorial guidelines? Is it free of typos? Do the links work? Those are all quality metrics. And then on the other side of that line, you have opinion. And people are gonna be people, and I have seen incredibly bad behavior on the part of executives all the way up into CEO meddling in the opinion side of marketing. Well, I don't like that color. I don't like that message. I don't like that turn of phrase. And when we implement Agile in marketing, and when we implement Scrum, we've got to be very, very crisp on this meets our definition of done in terms of quality. And hey, we're gonna allow for a little bit on this opinion side, but we've got to communicate very clearly when people are overstepping in terms of that opinion.
So it sounds
So
like there is the role. So I just want to, for our listeners, clarify the product owner seems to be an appropriate role in marketing then, Melissa.
Yes, I believe so.
That's awesome.
one of the principles of the Agile Marketing Manifesto is learning through experiments and data over opinions and conventions, okay? And this is a real issue in marketing, right? Everybody thinks they're a marketer. Everybody has an opinion about whether marketing is good or bad, okay? And there is a real tendency to, say, I like red, so that should be red, rather than going out and doing an experiment and comparing red and green and seeing which one delivers a better conversion rate, okay? So this is one of the real challenges when we implement Agile in marketing, is to move away from this opinions and conventions and all that sort of stuff to opinions and data. So that's an important cultural difference and cultural change that has to happen in many marketing organizations in order for marketing owners to be successful, because in the end, they need to deliver value to the organization and value to the customer. That really comes about from data and experiments, not from opinions, okay? The other factor that is really important for marketers is that marketers have a hard time saying no. Developers have no problem saying no, right? I mean, developers are used to saying, sorry, you're not going to get everything that you ask for. It's a three-legged stool. You can pick two of them. You can't get the third one. The whole spiel, right? Marketers are all the time, work just gets dropped in from the sky from some executive and the executive says, you must do this marketing thing just as soon as possible. I don't care if you planned out your sprint and it's going to totally throw everything off. You got to do this. That's kind of the way marketing has worked, right? Now, some of that is, it's always going to work that way. I mean, if you have a brand damaging event, and you've got to respond. You can't say, I'm in the middle of the sprint, wait till the next sprint, okay? But on the other hand, some of it's arbitrary. The executive just drops something in without realizing the impact on everything else that's gotten done. And so there are some cultural changes in most marketing organizations when they adopt Agile. They have to learn to say no to certain things.
That's really interesting. And obviously in technology, we have the same. They're called defects. Some defects are stop the sprint. We've got to fix this because the website's down, it's not generating money. And then the other defects are, hey, we can triage that. It can go in and it will be prioritized with the view of everything else that we're doing next. And I think maybe the discipline of software and technology, we've actually maybe a little bit, we've already got that discipline. And what you're saying is you need that discipline in marketing, which is really, really interesting. And also green, obviously, if you're going to be red or green. I mean, why would you pick red? Yeah, that was just, I mean, nobody would. I mean, come on. But so I appreciate that. All right. So we're coming to the end of our time box, which is, oh gosh, we could talk for hours. And, I'm hoping we'll be able to have maybe subsequent conversations, seeing what we will deliver this to the world, and we'll get some feedback on it. And then maybe we'll do a second increment. Now, just to use your sort of language, as it were. But I really, a lot of people listen to this podcast are Scrum Masters or Agile coaches, people that are helping teams. And so I'd really like to get your advice, both of you. I'd like you to, what would be the 3 or 4 things, or the 1 or 2 things that they should do? Because many of these Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, are not marketing experts, but now they're having to help marketing teams. So what should they concentrate on? And maybe Jim, if you'd like to start, what would be the few things that you would tell these Scrum Masters who are faced with these, creative, intelligent, amazing marketeers that are now doing Scrum for the first time?
Well, the first thing that I would say, and I don't know if the audience will like this, but it is easier to take a marketer who is steeped in marketing and train them to be a Scrum Master than it is to train a Scrum Master and teach them marketing. Okay, just that there's a lot to know about marketing, just as there's a lot to know about software development and so forth. Okay, so that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing that I would say is there are some fundamental differences between increments and user stories and how we use some of the language of Scrum. For example, user stories. Most features in software are delivered in one specific way. You implement the feature and it's done, right? Most user stories in marketing are delivered in many different ways. So for example, if I have a user story that a user needs to understand my product category and what the best things are to look at to evaluate a particular product or whatever it is, you could deliver that as a web page, you could deliver that as a webinar, you could deliver it as a podcast, you can deliver it as an ebook. I mean, there's probably tens, if not hundreds of ways that you could deliver that user story. And so every user story has lots of different increments and different ways to deliver it. So that's kind of one of the fundamental differences that Scrum Masters have to realize as they're helping Agile marketing teams. Melissa, did you have something to add?
Well, I think I would focus on empathy and humility. So I think Scrum Masters certainly can come into the marketing side, and it's a good trait within any Scrum Master, right? To come into a new team, listening, seeking to understand with humility, even if you've been a Scrum Master for a long time, that this might be a different context. And for some reason, I think of the reputation that Americans have when we go overseas, right? And we have this crazy expectation that people will speak English, that, if we just speak louder, somehow we'll get heard. And, gosh, why are things different? And why can't we have things the way they are in America? You have to recognize that you're essentially in a different country, and the norms are going to look different. The language might look different. And if you approach it with that mindset of acceptance, I think that there's a way for you to be extremely effective in this new environment.
All right, just to summarize then, what I think, Jim, you said was very much find that person that's going to deliver on those accountabilities of a Scrum Master and help them to be successful. Then don't expect the mechanisms that worked in a software team or in your experience previously to be the same. User stories is a great example. Definition of done is another, what an increment is. Go in with some curiosity and focus on the outcomes you're trying to achieve with those mechanisms rather than actually the mechanisms themselves. And then Melissa, just to sort of summarize, go in with humility, go in with the ability, curiosity, and be willing to listen and learn, and don't be telling everybody that they're wrong always and that this is a stupid idea. And I think those three things probably work well in any situation, but in particular in Agile marketing. Thank you so much for your time today. I've certainly learned a lot. I've realized that I need to be nicer to my marketing team and not keep throwing executive spanners into the works. So I'll try not to do that. Luckily, I have fantastic marketers, which is awesome, that work with me. But thank you for your time today. And obviously, for our listeners at home, if you want to learn more, Agile Marketing Alliance, look at the Agile Marketing Manifesto, and obviously ping both Melissa and Jim. I know that they love to talk about this and always there to help. So thank you, Melissa, Jim, for today. And thank you for our listeners.
Thank you, Dave.
I'm your host, Dave West. This is the Scrum.org community podcast. Thank you for tuning in today, and hopefully we'll continue this interesting conversation about Agile marketing in future episodes.